Welcome back to the Shiller and Hamilton Podcast. My name's Derek Harper with the firm here, and I'm joined by J.R. Yates, an attorney with the firm who's recently rejoined us. And we're here just to talk about a little bit about his history with the firm and where he's been, as well as what he does here for the firm. So, J.R., welcome back.
Good to be here.
And glad to have you here in the hot seat for the Shiller and Hamilton Podcast. So,
Thank you.
why don't we just kind of start off and tell everybody a little bit about yourself and stuff like that?
Okay. Yes, I was previously with the firm. I actually joined the firm while I was in officer training school with the Air Force.
Okay.
Just going back and forth, I had hung out with Bennett, Joel a couple of times, and then started with the firm, mostly coming to do Social Security, disability, some of the construction litigation, and some of the other litigation cases that we had. But in around 2016, I went active, did active duty orders, so that sent me down to Georgia. I was in Warner Robins for a few years, and then went to Montgomery, still on active orders with the military. And just recently, my wife retired, and so we moved back to Rock Hill. And I've been taking my own cases, just had my own firm going, and speaking with Joel and Bennett a few times, decided to come back and handle the Social Security disability cases here.
Gotcha. And what did you do for the Air Force?
I'm a JAG officer, so the military attorneys.
Okay. Can you kind of explain a little bit to people who may not understand? Because I had some friends from law school who did that, who went into JAG, but maybe just kind of explain what that entails. I mean, I'm sure most people have seen A Few Good Men or something like that,
Right.
But I'm sure everything is very high-level court-martial. So maybe just explain kind of what you did in that position and some cool things that you did that you could tell us about or anything like that.
Okay. So, the position is the military attorney. So you go in as an officer. And like I said, I started off in officer training school in Montgomery, Alabama. Then you have to go to JAG school. So they teach you how to be a military attorney. And then you get your assignment, whichever base you're in. I was a reservist. So I was a JAG officer for a reserve base out of Seymour Johnson in Goldsboro, North Carolina. Okay. But also at the same time, as a reservist, you kind of backfill for the active duty. And that's what probably more people know about when you have court martials and discharge boards, the things that are actual litigation. But the other side of it is the advising commanders and the basic discipline of the military. So if a commander has a concern about really anything within his shop and wants to make sure that what they're doing is legal, then they'll go to JA. They always say that they have JAG on their speed dial. And in my position now, I'm the SJA for a unit that's out of Atlanta at Dobbins Air Reserve Base. And yeah, the commanders call all the time and they want to know, I had this person get arrested for a DUI, or I had this person who's, I don't know, just done something that's against the rules. The UCMJ, which is the military's, those are our criminal statutes. Okay. And then in the Air Force, we have an AFI, which are Air Force instructions. They're more of the, if you think of the administrative side versus the criminal side, but both are rules and regulations that airmen have to go by. And it's our job as JAG to interpret much of it.
Yeah. So if people don't understand, court-martial is just court, correct?
Yes, it's a criminal trial whenever someone has committed a crime in the Air Force or in the military. Then they can have a court-martial, and if they lose, then there's some sort of discipline up to being discharged out of the military. And if they win, then they just don't have the conviction. Okay. And it does have a federal conviction that goes with it. So it is not it's a big deal. So you don't want to take it lightly.
Yeah, I understand that. And so kind of just like the private sector of attorneys, there's different types of JAGs.
Correct.
So you could do prosecution or defense. on a criminal side. I know when I was doing family law that there are some JAGs that handle some family disputes amongst people who are staying on base and married and things like that. And then you said that there's obviously an advisory role too. So, how did you kind of come to be in the Air Force? Just real briefly.
Briefly, I have a friend who he went through ROTC at Clemson. He was an officer in the Air Force, and on the day that I passed the bar exam, he came to me. He's not an attorney, but he just said, "It's a great job." Knowing what I enjoy doing, he said that I'd love to be a JAG officer. The respect and the position itself. Great position, need good people to do it. So I looked into it, and maybe 2 or 3 years after that, I applied for the position and was selected. You have to actually apply for the JAG Corps and go through interviews and all this other stuff.
Yeah, like I said, I remember a few friends from law school that did the same thing. We're not in ROTC in college and just decided to go after the fact. On the private sector side, what led you to Social Security Disability?
It was coming to this firm. It was a field that I had considered. I enjoy helping the clients because more times than not, there are people who cannot work. They need the help. They need most of the time the health insurance is the biggest thing that they're looking for, but also having a check that can help them get through month to month because they're unable to work their job. That helps them out as well. But when I first came here, with this being a personal injury firm, there were a lot of people who had injuries that were so substantial from their car wreck or whatever the personal injury was that they were unable to work anymore. Yeah. And so it seemed like it'd be a good fit. They were, the cases would be here, and they were. So that's really how it started.
Gotcha. And there's some synergy there. I feel like, I've had several either personal injury accident claims or when I was doing workers' comp that the people ended up being permanently disabled afterwards. And so that is good. And obviously, you served your country, but at the same time, you've doubled down, I feel like, on the good lawyer mentality here of using your training and your education to help people, and you did that serving your country as also serving your community and everything too, which is obviously something that was built into this firm from the very beginning. Yeah. So since you're doing disability and Social Security disability, why don't you kind of give a little brief overview of what that is? Because there's people who've probably dealt with it, and a lot of people probably have heard of or know people who are disabled. But there are two different programs, under the Social Security Administration. So maybe just explain kind of a brief overview of what that is, and then we'll kind of dig deeper. Okay.
Yes. So within disability, if you look at disability as an umbrella, there are two different branches that fall underneath this. And so you have the SSI, which is supplemental income, okay, and that's considered more like a social services. That's for people who don't have enough work credits. They haven't actually paid enough into it, and it's a limited amount of money, but it's a supplemental portion of money. And you would be able to qualify for Medicaid if you're disabled under SSI. But there are restrictions, the same as you would find with food stamps or Section 8. So you can't have more than $2,000 in your bank account. You can't have more than $3,000 in assets, $2,000 or $3,000 in assets. Mm-hmm. Can't have more than one car, things of that nature. Yeah. The other side is SSDI, which stands for disability insurance. Whenever you pay taxes, and there's a portion of it, FICA, a portion of FICA is actually a disability insurance policy. And so if you're unable to work, then your insurance kicks in and you'll receive a portion of your pay for the time that you're disabled. And most of these people are permanently disabled, so you receive it up until the time that you have to qualify to get your actual Social Security check.
Okay. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. Go ahead.
Oh, well, with SSDI, they don't have the same restrictions. You don't have to have a limited amount of money in your account or anything like that. It's actually what you have paid to have within your disability.
Much like Social Security.
Correct.
So it's going to be based on what you've paid in, your years of work, your work credits, which I want to circle back to in a second.
Yes.
And then there's a calculation basically that is based upon this is how much you would get if you were to retire.
Right.
And then there's also a statement of how much you would get if you were to become disabled, today.
Yes.
But going back to the work credits, kind of explain that to people because I know there's a very detailed calculation as to how that's calculated and kind of what that means and what that threshold is in order to qualify for SSDI.
Right. One, there is an amount that you need to actually make and pay into the program. So working part-time for your entire life, you probably won't have enough work credits. But each credit is when you have paid into enough for a quarter of the year. It's broken down into 4 quarters per year. And the generally speaking, you want to have at least 40 credits. Generally speaking, now, if you're less than 10 years or, any of those things, it fluctuates. But if you don't have 40 credits of full-time work, then you probably won't qualify for SSDI. Okay. But you could still qualify for SSI. And then the other thing, and I almost forgot to mention this, for SSDI, you have to apply within 5 years of the last date that you worked. Mm-hmm. So as with any insurance, if you don't pay, it goes away. Yeah. But with Social Security, at least it sticks around for 5 years after you stop working. So it gives you the chance to see, can I go back to work? Yes. But with that being said, whenever you're thinking about applying, you don't want to wait. So if you cannot work and you've tried for 2 years or so and you just can't go back to work, you need to go ahead and put in your application because the clock stops ticking once you've applied. But so the process itself could take 3 years, potentially, and that takes you outside the 5. But as long as you applied within the 5 years of the last date you worked, then you'll be covered under SSDI.
Kind of like tolling a statute of limitations.
Correct. Yes.
Now, just to kind of make sure we're laying this out there because we like to have our podcast. You've just joined us here, but we like to have this as informational to anyone from all levels of sophistication with it, if you've ever dealt with it or if you're thinking about dealing with it or anything. So the basic hypothetical would be is if you work full time for 10 years, then you've built up your credits. Correct? Okay. So just so everybody knows, you can't come out of high school, work 3 years, and then become disabled. You're going to need to have a good base of work under your belt for SSDI.
Well, you still have there's a chance. That's why I said it does fluctuate depending on your age. Okay. So an adult, you would be expected, let's say you're 40 years old, but you just started working at 35, then you're not going to have enough credit. Understood. But you would just get a lower amount if you were a 24-year-old who worked 6 years, from the time they were 18. Yeah. But the fact that you did pay into it, you could
possibly qualify. Okay.
Yes.
So if anyone's out there thinking about disability, what kind of, I know there's probably thousands of different things that could qualify, but just generally, is it mental and physical elements? What's some things that kind of could qualify or what really is the threshold to get in? Is it just the actual injury itself, or is it going to be more how that injury affects your specific person?
The best way to describe it, Social Security goes by what they call SGA, that's substantial gainful activity. Okay. And you have to have no SGA for at least 12 consecutive months. That's the minimum. It has to last for at least a year and no substantial gainful activity. And what that means is that you're unable to have any work or work-like activity that would equate to full-time work. And that's any job. So any job in the national economy, even things like going to college full-time where you don't need extra assistance and that sort of thing, that can still count as substantial gainful activity. So the things that can limit your SGA are both mental and physical. So if you have a bad back and you actually can't stand up or sit down for an 8-hour day, for a full work day or a full work week, then that would limit your SGA and potentially mean that you have no SGA. Mm-hmm. Also, at the same time, if you have mental conditions where you have whatever your condition may be, bipolar, anxiety, PTSD, things like that, if it keeps you in a place where you can't focus on the job, you're off task, you can't concentrate on what you're doing, or you can't actually be around the general public, or you can't leave your home, then those would be things that limit your SGA and could potentially lead to no SGA.
Okay. And then also I can assume here, it also depends on you, the person, and your work history as well, right? Because obviously we're lawyers. If we became paraplegic and lost the use of our legs, we could probably still do our job.
Correct.
Someone who has a more physical job, who's on their feet every day. So there is a variable there, correct?
Yes. The things that are taken into account are your education and your prior work history,
okay,
and your age. A younger person is expected to be able to pick up other jobs, whereas when the Social Security office calls you an older person, they have their own ages. But whenever that happens, you only have to be able to not work the jobs that you have had, whereas younger people are expected to be able to have other jobs. But it's not to an extent where you've been a construction worker all of your life and now, well, you can go and be a lawyer.
Yeah.
It wouldn't be that. But it would be jobs that are similar.
Yeah. Within the same kind of sphere of their training and their knowledge and their experience and everything.
Right.
So what's the process kind of start like for someone who wants to apply or qualifies to apply for Social Security disability?
Yes. One of the first things is much of this is online now.
Okay.
And so what you'll want to do is either make an appointment and go in to your local Social Security office. Many of them are open now with COVID, but they are appointment only. So you can set an appointment. But if you're fairly handy with the internet, it's just as easy to go online and start the application online. The main things that you're going to want to do is make sure that you have all of your current doctors' names, and your cases are built on the medical records. So making sure that you have the doctor's names, phone numbers, addresses, those things, because you'll just put those in to your application. If you happen to have the records, then you can upload them. But if not, Social Security, the administration is supposed to reach out to those doctors, get that information, and that initiates the claim.
Okay. So basically it's an online application.
Yes.
Or an in-person application, which the Social Security office is probably scanning in and uploading. Okay. Now, does someone necessarily need an attorney for that initial application?
No, you don't necessarily need one.
Okay.
You can, like I said, if you are remotely competent with the internet, you can just go online and put your information in. And the thing is for us, I would take a case once you've been denied one time.
Okay.
The reason being, just putting in your information, that's all that you're going to do. They may have you go to see some of their doctors for their evaluations, but that's not something that an attorney would go with you to anyways.
Yeah.
But you'll want to make sure that you are going to any appointments that they set and letting the doctors know who evaluate you, everything that concerns you, every condition that you may have. If the doctor says, "How are you doing?" You don't say fine. You tell them exactly what's wrong, what things are limiting you from working. Once you have gotten past that stage, and if your conditions don't fall squarely on the grid, then you can have a reconsideration.
Okay.
And the reconsideration is basically a different part of the office looking at your file as well. It's good to go ahead and get an attorney at that point, because you can just making sure that your record is complete, it's up to date, that it's being presented in the best light possible. But if you're also denied at reconsideration, then you can appeal and ask to be heard in front of an administrative law judge. And I would highly suggest having an attorney at that point, because we can help you set your case and present your case in a way that's most beneficial, and you present your evidence most clearly in front of a judge, and the judge will have the final decision regardless of what the lower offices have said.
Okay. Now, so just want to unpack that a little bit. There's two appeal processes.
Correct.
One's basically on paper, and the other would be requesting a hearing. And now it's a very high percentage that are denied that first time, correct?
I don't know the actual.
Well, I'm sure
percentages.
no one knows probably. But in your experience, do you see that a lot are denied on that initial application?
Yes, I do. So at the lower level, well, they have what's called it's the grid, and so you have different sections that the Social Security Administration is looking at. So they'll have musculoskeletal, they'll have mental conditions. They'll have, and each one of them are the back is one area in and of itself. If your condition doesn't fit squarely within one of the areas on the grid, then you're denied.
Okay.
When you get in front of an administrative law judge, you're no longer trying to say that your condition fits squarely in the grid. You're saying the combination of your conditions makes it so that you're unable to have substantial gainful activity. Mm-hmm. So the people who are looking at the lower level is just round peg, round hole.
Yeah.
And so many times you can find someone who has a lot of things that are wrong and they actually can't work, but their condition individually don't fall squarely into
that category. They won't.
Right.
Now, I do know that there are some pretty strict guidelines as far as the timelines rather. Yes. And kind of explain those and why that, after that denial, either the first time or at the very least the second time, someone should definitely hire an attorney or at least consult with an attorney, and what those timelines can mean ultimately if you are later on down the line approved.
Yes. Within Social Security, you have a 60-day time frame to appeal.
Okay.
That is a very, very tight window, and if you don't contact someone or put the appeal in immediately, life happens. Mm-hmm. And 60 days, it doesn't even sound like a lot of time, but it goes by even faster. Mm-hmm. So the day that you receive a denial, if you are going to get an attorney, you should contact an attorney that day. The reason that you want to make sure that you adhere to these time frames. So if it's a case that you started on, let's just say January 1st of 2020, you put in your initial application.
Okay.
And a year later you're denied and you wait your 60 days, you go past 60 days, then you have to reapply. And so the thing with disability is that you're able to get back pay for each month that your application was there, or each month that you were disabled. Sometimes there are different days, but for the time that you were disabled, you can get back pay going to that time. So a case that has to start over in 2021 and then is ultimately accepted in 2022 would have a year's worth of back pay. But if the person were to get their appeal in time and they were accepted in 2022, then they would have 2 years worth of back pay. And let's just, just as a hypothetical number, because I'm an attorney, I don't do math in public. Yeah. So they get $1,000 a month. Well, that's $12,000 difference.
Mm-hmm. And it's just sitting there that they missed out.
Correct.
And it's a pretty strict timeline too, correct? I mean, it is postmarked that day and that's it.
Correct.
Okay. Now, let me ask you this. When someone's trying to make that decision, correct me if I'm wrong, there are non-attorney representatives in this world, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now, what can they do, and then why should someone maybe veer away from a non-attorney representative versus an actual licensed attorney in the state? Because, well, the state really doesn't matter, but within the industry of Social Security disability, what the difference of those were and why they allow non-attorney representatives.
So you are correct. There are non-attorney representatives, and even on the form, whenever I sign someone up to say that I'm going to be their representative, mm-hmm. you have the check boxes for which one you are, whether you're an attorney or just someone who is helping the person out. Mm-hmm. With being an attorney, you do have we'll call it the safeguard that this person is still has oversight with the bar. And those are some of the check boxes to make sure that you've never been disciplined by the bar, you've never been disbarred. And if you have to acknowledge that, check that off, and that gives the client an opportunity to question that. Why were you disciplined?
Yeah.
What happened? Versus a representative, it can be just someone who has just familiarity with the process. There's no
so like I think it's a lot like a lot of things. So that was created probably so that family members could help people fill out applications. Let's be honest. That was probably just so you could help someone who was severely disabled get through the process. Problem is just like anything, there's going to be people who try to monetize that. And kind of like debt collection, these companies that advertise, we'll help you with your debt collection and you pay us $500, and all they do is write one letter, and if they're denied or doesn't help your debt, they just cash your check. So I just want to make sure people understand that there are things out there. There could be things on the internet, especially in today's world, that could argue or at least advertise, hey, we'll help you with your Social Security claim. And I definitely think it's critical, just like anything else, you should consult an attorney. Now, it doesn't really matter where that attorney's from, correct? Can you kind of explain that a little bit? Because this is not state court.
Oh, yes. Yeah. It's more of a federal practice, and it's an administrative practice as opposed to being in actual judicial courtroom. So you do not have to be licensed in the state that the hearings, for Rock Hill, our hearings, Rock Hill, Lancaster, Chester goes to Columbia, but York County, we all go up to Charlotte for our hearing. That's where the hearing office is. So the state itself is not, that's not the guidelines for Social Security, but it is good to have someone who is familiar, with the area, and once you've done it a few times, you'll be in front of some of the same judges repeatedly, just like you would in state court. So there are definitely advantages.
So someone who may be familiar with that regional office.
Right.
But I wanted to make sure someone understood, if they're listening to this in Charlotte, North Carolina, that they could still call you here, even though we're in Rock Hill. It's not like it's as geographically defined as like state court is.
It is not.
So, all right. So if you were right now just had someone who was asking some general questions, or if you just wanted to give a brief little advice of what someone could be looking out for and what they could do to better prep, themselves if they're thinking about filing for Social Security disability.
The thing I said earlier, that these cases are built on your medical records.
Okay.
You'll definitely want to make sure that you're talking to your doctor about this. Making sure that she is on board with the fact that, your conditions make it so that you're unable to work, and is actually writing these things down in your medical records. So actually have the conversation with your doctor. If you are not seeing a doctor regularly, it's going to make it very difficult to win a disability case because it's based on your medical records. So
no self-diagnosis here.
No self-diagnosis, not just because a cousin had the same thing and you feel like it's the same thing. It needs to be in your medical records.
Good. Anything else you think you might want to add, to advise anybody or anything else like that?
The main thing is with these cases, especially if you're trying to get SSDIs, just pay attention to your timelines. You have 5 years from the date you last worked. You have 60 days if you're denied to put in your appeal. These end up being very tight windows. So always be aware of these. And also, most importantly, just because you're denied, don't give up. I've gotten calls from people who said, I applied, 2 years ago and I got denied, and now I'm apply again. They just got discouraged off the initial denial. Don't let that happen. Put in the appeal. Come and talk to an attorney. There may be ways to make your case stronger. Yeah,
you might just need to see a different specialist, or or like you said, just maybe bolster up those medical records a little bit, or maybe something was missing.
That happens regularly.
Yes.
That there's an important piece of medical evidence that's not actually in your file.
Yep. And we see it a lot. I mean, doctors are not perfect either, and everything that they do, there's so much clerical work that they do on those records. So I definitely think that's key. As far as, there's something I was going to ask. We'll just pause here. Well, thanks, J.R. I appreciate you explaining all that for us and for everyone listening. And so if anyone had any questions about Social Security disability, you're available to set up an appointment. That can be over the phone, by email, as well as in person, correct?
Correct.
And that's at all of our offices across the state, correct?
Yes. I'm willing to travel, Beaufort, Rock Hill, Lancaster,
Yep.
And anywhere else.
Anywhere else in between,
Yes.
the telephone's going to reach.
Yes.
So, well, I appreciate you coming on. Welcome back to the practice.
Thank you.
And so thank you for watching and listening to the Shiller and Hamilton podcast, and we'll see you next time.